Welcome back. Democrat vice presidential nominee Tim Walz made quite the impression as a teacher in China, according to a new NPR report. Former students speaking to the outlet calling Walz lively and cheerful during his time teaching English and a U.S. history at a Chinese middle school. And during a 1991 lesson on Chinese communism, Walz reportedly said the ideology means that everyone is the same and everyone shares. NPR writing this: Walz became part of one of the first government-sanctioned groups of American educators to arrive after the country opened its doors to the world in the 1980s. The 89 to 90 school year started shortly after the Chinese army crushed pro-democracy protesters centered on Beijing's Tiananmen Square in June of 1989, you remember. Walz has made roughly 30 trips to China since then, and even got married on the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. The Republican-led House Oversight Committee is investigating Walz for his long-standing connections to China. Joining me now is Gatestone Institute senior fellow, author of The Coming Collapse of China and China is Going to War, Gordon Chang. Gordon, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. What is your assessment of Tim Walz's relationship with China and its communism leadership?
Well, first of all, we got to be very concerned about his company that he set up in 1995, Educational Travel Adventures. This was an adventure that had to be approved by the Communist Party's United Front Work Department. That's the part of the party that subverts foreign governments. So basically, this was a whole series of events that the Communist Party just loved. And during that time, Walz has been quoted as some very pro-Maoist things. And, people changed their views. But just a couple weeks ago, he talked about socialism being the same as a good neighbor. Right. So clearly, those views that he had in his formative years are ones he still holds today, which means he shouldn't be one heartbeat away from the Oval Office.
I'm wondering if this piece about U.S. firms warning against unprecedented Hong Kong cyber rules is evidence that Hong Kong can no longer be differentiated from communist China. I mean, American companies this morning are warning that proposed cyber regulations in Hong Kong could grant its government unprecedented access to their computers, a threat to tech giants operating in the region, Gordon. As you know, you've talked about this so much. The legislation in Hong Kong would allow authorities to connect equipment to private firms' computer systems and install programs on them. Hong Kong officials claim the legislation is aimed at protecting against cyber attacks, but critics say government surveillance powers would become overly broad and harm tech investments in Hong Kong. I mean, Wall Street has to admit at this point that they've been struggling to maintain this fiction that Hong Kong remains independent after the CCP went in there and took over.
Yeah, it certainly is not independent, especially after the national security law that was imposed in 2020. These cyber rules are basically the same as the rules that China put in place about 18 months, 2 years ago, which essentially gives the party total run of access of foreign computer systems. Which means if you're a foreign company, you let them into your system in China, you're letting them into your system worldwide, unless you do what some companies, which is to just air gap their China operations.
I don't know how you do that if you're a major bank. I mean, J.P. Morgan is there, Bank of America is there. Are they all being surveilled?
Yeah. If you're a major bank, you can't air gap your systems. That's just not the way financial systems operate these days. Only some companies can do that. And it's very, very hard because once the Chinese know about your general architecture in China, they can use that to penetrate your architecture elsewhere.
I mean, we've seen the CCP march into Hong Kong. Do you think that that could happen? I mean, could that happen in Taiwan? I mean, could it happen in America?
Yeah, I mean, you look at this right now, it's very concerning what Gordon is saying and been warning about this, and now you have a candidate whose views at best are muddied on what he believes about China. This is just a concern that Americans, I think, are not getting a full picture on because you never hear about this connection except places like this. And yeah. Look, China does the subversive very well. And I think that's the part that everybody missed, that we're being scared into the military side, which is a real threat as someone in the military, but it's the subversive side in these countries across the world and what Gordon was talking about that bother me and I think more than anybody else.
So many stories are bothersome. I mean, federal prosecutors have arrested a Chinese dissident living in the United States for allegedly spying on pro-democracy groups and sending information back to China. Officials say that the 67-year-old man has been spying on the United States since 2018, providing information to China upon its direction, even traveling at least 3 times to meet Chinese intelligence officers face to face. Authorities reportedly recovered instructions from China, guiding the man's spying activities. He's been charged with acting and conspiring to act as an unregistered agent of the People's Republic of China. Gordon, your reaction?
Yeah, 2 things here. First of all, China uses every point of contact to undermine the United States. That's Doug's point. I mean, regardless of it. Second point, you know, American presidents have known for a very long time that Ministry of State Security agents have operated on our soil. And also, we've allowed Chinese consular officials to do the same thing. And we don't do anything about it. So, of course, the Chinese say, look, we're going to violate your sovereignty because you can't defend yourself, or you won't defend yourself.
And then there's the nuclear front. President Biden reportedly approved a secret nuclear strategy which refocuses on the Chinese threat. Saying this, the White House never announced that Mr. Biden had approved the revised strategy called the Nuclear Employment Guidance. The document, updated every 4 years or so, is so highly classified that there are no electronic copies, Gordon. Only a small number of hard copies distributed to a few national security officials. China responded to the report, saying it is, quote, seriously concerned and accusing the United States of, quote, peddling the China nuclear threat narrative. China possesses roughly 500 operational nuclear warheads as of May 2023 and will likely have more than 1,000 nuclear warheads by 2030, according to the Defense Department, Gordon.
Yeah, and China probably will have something like, some people say, about 7,000 by about the middle of next decade. We just don't know. But the point is, this is one of the fastest nuclear buildups that we have seen. Also, you know, China is threatening to use this. They always say, look, if you come to the defense of Taiwan, we're going to nuke you first. So what we are doing is reacting. This nuclear employment guidance is stunning because, remember, you go back to 2022, Biden's nuclear security posture review. This was basically a review where he was going to ditch decades-long American policy on protecting our allies. He didn't do it, but only after ferocious lobbying by France, Germany, Australia. For Biden to actually say we might increase our deployed nukes, that is stunning change of opinion.
Wow. All right. We will leave it there. Gordon, it's great to have you this morning. Thank you so much.